I guess in a way I could say I was meant to be doing exactly what I'm doing. And I love the convergence of people and clothes and design and making a nice place for people to come to and to feel welcome. People like the idea of designing their own thing. So how do you express yourself in a way that's not going to hurt anybody, but really kind of celebrates what's in your heart?
Yeah.
And it can be with food, it can be with cars, it can be with your socks, it can be with the way you order your books on your shelf, it can be the way you organize your drawer. That's design right there.
Welcome to the Spark Ideas Podcast. I'm John Yerian, your guide in this journey to sparking something new in your career or your life. This is a show about starting things, about empowering people to connect with others, and about making a difference in the world through collective action. In each episode, I have the privilege of discussing foundational ideas of life and work with some of the most insightful leaders across a range of industries. From technology to hospitality, from journalism to sports. You'll be inspired by how they bring these ideas to life, to help you apply them in your own work and life, and to spark your own journey. Sid and Ann Mashburn have been reinventing what good looks like at the cross-section of fashion, design, retail, and hospitality for decades. Following successful careers in New York at leading fashion houses such as J. Crew, Ralph Lauren, and Tommy Hilfiger for Sid, and Vogue and Glamour magazines for Ann, the power couple decided to settle down in Atlanta to raise their 5 girls. They opened a store that effortlessly mixed beautiful clothing, accessories, and other cool, special, and useful things for men and women inside a fun, inviting, and carefully curated space, staffed with the nicest salespeople and tailors in town. Since then, they've gone on to launch 5 more stores across the U.S. and an online shop featuring classic and unique clothing and treasures. Sid is the king of effortless cool, while at the same time incredibly kind and full of wisdom about work and life. Sid Mashburn, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John. It's nice to be here.
It's such a pleasure to be with you. And as always, we're going to pick apart a concept, a word, and it's one that everybody already knows or thinks they know what it means, but I have a suspicion that your relationship to this word will be a little bit different. And I'd love to learn about what it means to you and how you apply it today. And we're going to talk a little bit about design. Such a simple little word, no big deal. And before we bumble into a definition, I would love to know whether or not you consider yourself a designer.
Yes, I would.
Like comfortably?
Yes, for sure. For sure.
And when did you give yourself that permission? When did you wake up and say, today I know I am a designer?
Probably in high school.
Really?
Yeah. I wasn't particularly great at school. I loved sports. I liked girls. I liked music. I liked kind of popular-ish things.
Sure.
And I liked working. I liked going to work. And I liked putting some scratch in my pocket. I thought that was pretty cool. And there was not a lot to do in Mississippi. And my grandparents were in the retail business. They were what you would call back in those days merchants.
Sure.
So the only store that I saw that they owned was a clothing store called Collier's Cash and Carry in Pelahatchie, Mississippi, which was a chicken town, along with Forest and Morton, 2 other chicken towns. So in those towns, they had a furniture store, a hardware store, an implement store. So they were merchants to that community. It wasn't a poor community, but it wasn't a particularly well-to-do community either. Nobody wanted for anything, but there was, it was not a lavish environment. And so I was always around that as a kid, but never thought much about it. But started getting into clothes early. I had older sisters who were really good dressers and into clothes, and I had an older brother who was a really good dresser.
What I'm hearing a little bit is like you might have been born with taste. Is that fair?
Taste, it was in alignment with my family's taste.
Okay.
So it was our taste.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was one where you dressed well and fairly neatly. You were put together. If you were going somewhere, you were put together.
And growing up, it was just that way. Your first experience was just the way we are.
Yeah.
As you got older, looking back, did you come to a theory of why y'all were that way? What had that be important to your folks or to your family?
I think part of it is because we were in the clothing business and in the provisions business of procuring things and selling them to people.
So you were living advertisements.
Kind of, and we weren't conscious of that, but I think that's kind of, we were just into it.
Yeah.
Like for me, grunge never worked. Okay. Being a little less put together was kind of cool, but never unkempt.
Yeah.
Never like, I never wanted to be that person ever. And many of my friends did. They were like, why are you wearing that? I'm like, I thought it was cool.
So we know you're a designer and that you graciously accept and identify with that term in here. Are you more a designer than you are a businessman? Do they compete? Are they all one and the same? Because it's two different things to me, and you might see it differently.
Yeah, I think that they, in my case, fortunately, a former boss of mine characterized me. She said, "You're 65% designer, 35% merchant." And the merchant really was, in those days, when you think of the days of the Gap and J. Crew and Banana Republic and all of them, Abercrombie, merchants were the people who ran the business. So they were kind of the business side. So she said, most designers they're not concerned with the business so much, but you're concerned with the business, and you're clearly, like design a lot. So I always thought that was a very important conversion point or convergence point. And it's funny because, Ann grew up in a family where her dad was in retail for 40 years, and he was a fantastic businessman. I mean, he bought Lululemon stock in its first year. Yeah. He just was like, we hadn't seen this before. This is really cool. So, and she's got a fantastic business mind. And I'd say that business, she has a business degree from college, and she was really our CFO in the early days. Yeah. And so we kind of trade off in those regards, because sometimes I'm the designer and she's the business person. And then some days we flip over. So I wouldn't even say we're necessarily complementary one-to-one, but parts of us are very complementary.
Well, I wonder how pervasive or universal that design thinking is for you, because you run your business a certain way. You have designed it in effect, right? It's not out of the box. It wasn't from somebody else's template. And so there's preference and choice. Yep. When I think about design, I just kind of think about commitment. Yep. Designing something means getting clear on what you're not going to do. Right. It's like, okay, it's about eliminating.
I think you're a designer too.
Oh, I appreciate that. And if you're watching this conversation on screen, you're dressed a lot better than I am.
No,
so you can mean the term different.
I see. I can spot it in somebody else too.
Okay. So. Well, we'll table that. Okay. But to what extent do you think of it that way, as like designing business, right? And is that real or true, or how does that influence your thinking around things that we would put over here in the business category?
Well, there was, the term placemaking, right?
I really do.
Yeah.
I do.
It's very important to placemake. And so our store, when we opened it, it was Ann and me and our home furniture, and us just kind of pulling all these tear sheets together and working with an architect and also our general contractor to do a mashup of what we wanted to present. And we wanted it to feel like our home. But we felt like when we put it on the backside of a center in West Midtown, it was like, I didn't know we didn't know what we were doing. No. But a friend of mine took me there, and it was a cool place because Taqueria was there, Bacchanalia was there, JCT had just opened up. So other designers, although they were in food and hospitality, they were design people too.
Well, you say you didn't know what you were doing, and I know that's sincere. And you mean it. I think there's a lot of truth in it. You probably had an experience of not knowing what you were doing at the time. But you go back to this little kid in Mississippi who already knows his brother's a great dresser, right? Who has a sense of how things can be put together. And in that, I get the feeling there's a lot of knowing what you're doing. Like looking right at something and saying instantly, that doesn't fit. Right. That's not our taste. It doesn't work. This works. There would have to be a lot of that inside of the not knowing, right? Oh, is this the right location? Or how do we monetize every square foot?
Yeah.
But there'd be a bunch of choices in it. Is that fair?
Yes, but things I take for granted, honestly, because I'm like, well, that's just, I don't like that blue. Enough. So I think that's kind of, you feel like parts of you are just your wiring.
Sure.
And some of those things you have to beat back because they're not so attractive.
Well,
but
I think there might be listeners, and rightly so, saying, wow, what a gifted guy. He just sprang from the earth with this great taste. And you're being a little self-deprecating, and I appreciate it. The other piece of it, though, is I find most people have some sense of something. They've got innate gifts or talents or perspectives. Oftentimes, they don't give themselves permission to express them.
Yeah, that's true.
Hold. And what I'm looking at is a guy who at various points in life did stuff. Yeah. You may not have known where it came from or how it originated, but you didn't hold it back or live out of fear of like, well, maybe this is what I'm supposed to do.
Right.
And I don't want to project. Is that?
No, that's totally fair. Because I guess in a way I could say I was meant to be doing exactly what I'm doing. And I love the convergence of people and clothes and design and making a nice place for people to come to and to feel welcome. So when you cross the threshold in our store, I feel an incumbency of, I want to give him a return on this visit. So I'm going to offer you a Coke or a glass of water or coffee or a beer. I'm going to say, I'm going to flip a record. You got anything you want to listen to? And the place should be neat. There should be other people that go, good afternoon. Hey, I'm Eric. Nice to see you. And just people really sort of casually going about life. And we kind of scripted it, but not really. I mean, it's really kind of the people that we feel have come to us that wanted to work in that environment.
Well, and if anybody, and we've all been in the stores and seen it, or many of us have experienced it. If you haven't, go find one. And, it's not, get on the internet. It's not
on down.
Yeah, it's not hard. And boy, when you talk about that, what I do not hear is you pitching me on some kind of a loyalty program. I'm not hearing a bottom line driven scheme to try to get people to stay in the stores 30 minutes longer because the research proves they'll spend an extra $18.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't hear any of that. I suspect some of it might be happening.
Yeah.
Right? But it's a byproduct from what I can see is really just a consideration of how things ought to be. They just ought to be that way in and of themselves.
Right. You nailed it. Because the thing is, I can't speak for Ann because our tastes and a little bit of our approaches are slightly different, but I don't put anything in the store I will not wear. Period. Okay. Now, there's some things that I've designed or mashed up, and then I get them in the store and I'm like, that color's not quite right. Okay. So there's some mistakes that are kind of come after the fact.
Yep.
And I'm like, God, I wish that wouldn't have occurred. And sometimes what we'll do is we'll wash them or over dye them or just let them be and see if people like them. And if they don't like them, the customer will vote for them. So what it makes our process of, we don't really have to sell the stuff. We share it, Yeah. Hey, and it's so much easier to share than to sell.
It is. There's still something in there that I think folks could really learn from. And we've got listeners in very different disciplines and businesses who are trying to wrap their heads around design. And what I hear is the willingness to make a lot of choices.
Yeah.
A lot of choices. And then have those choices observed publicly.
Yes.
And that can be nerve-wracking for a lot of people. A lot of folks, it's not that they don't have a sense of fashion, it's that they have a sense of fear. And so they default to the safest mainstream choices, consciously or not, in an effort to really kind of not get noticed. Right, to dress to blend in, and tell themselves, well, I don't really get design, and it might be a little bit different. I don't know what you would say to somebody else who's jammed up around that notion of making all these choices feels risky, or I might be wrong, or I'm just not as gifted as Sid or Ann.
Well, we that's why we have salespeople that really focus on serving you, and they are not on any individualized commission program. Okay. We have a pooled incentive so that whatever we all sell, we all benefit from. Okay. But we do not say that if you sell a certain amount, you're going to get, X percent, as an individual, because then that builds a team aspect to taking care of the customer.
Yep.
And you don't feel like you have to elbow somebody out of the way to get to somebody who's a big spender,
Right.
But one thing that Ann said early on, which was really very cool, because the back of our store is an open air tailor shop. And so, as part of that tailor shop are the men's dressing rooms. Well, over the wall used to be the office, and now it's a stock room. And she used to work back there. And she said, I've never, of course, I have not been around men dressing that much. And, but she said, when I hear over the wall what y'all do, it's cool because it's more like you're prescribing than dictating. And so I want to be able to dress a guy that can go, if he wants to go backstage, he can get a pair of black Chelsea boots, black jeans, black cashmere sweater, white shirt, go for it. If he wants to look super preppy, we got that. If he wants to look like a Sunday school teacher, we got that. If he wants to look like James Bond, we got that. And it's like, but all those things work together.
Yep.
So it's not like there's we build it according to what the person's context of their life looks like.
See, I think that's so important. And when I think about the kind of the story here, the narrative of what you've created, for me, it's all rooted in a really strong and clear sense of self and in the community you came from and the family you grew up in. And I would imagine it's a whole lot easier to dress yourself if you know who you are.
Yeah.
Right? If you have a sense of what you are and what you represent, it gets really fun to find things to ornament it or make it present.
Yeah.
Because then it connects and it feels like expression and not impersonation.
That's a fantastic way of putting it. And also you can put a little curve, a little French twist on something.
Sure. And
a little extra salt somewhere.
Right. And it's like sitting across from you and you're just extremely you, right? There's just a lot of you happening because there's layers to your voice, but also everything you put on. And to me, all of that is design, but it's rooted in this necessity of self-awareness or knowledge of self. And I think that's a challenge for a lot of folks too, in many different contexts, whether they're entrepreneurs or just as individuals, struggling to really understand what they are or are not.
Yeah.
That would make it really hard for them to pick out that tie. It's like, what does that mean? What does it make me? Where you wear it and it's like, that's just you.
You're touching on something that really is a real vulnerability, not just for men, but for women too.
Yeah.
I mean, sort of the insecurities that play out in the store. And we don't really think about that per se, but we are looking to provide a man or a woman confidence and to help them be comfortable in their own skin and to look like who they are.
Right.
And not to have a bunch of different looks and to kind of get a consistent look going and be cool to stay with that. Because, we have a sort of a glib saying is like, I want to wear the same outfit in Mississippi, in Manhattan, and in Milan. Okay. I don't want a wardrobe change.
Right.
Because if I have a wardrobe change, I start to kind of worry about what I'm going to wear.
Yep.
And I start thinking differently. It's like, I don't want the clothes to really occupy that much of your brain space because you got much more important things to do.
Well, we're sticking with clothes, but I think listeners can kind of extrapolate and see the broader meaning here. But earning a sense of self, taking the effort to reflect that to others in something like clothes. Right. Cool thing about that in Milan is your clothes could remind you who you are. You might be getting a little confused, and then you can look in your closet and benefit from the grounding effect.
Or are you really a red corduroy coat guy?
Right.
Maybe.
You have to back that up. I can pick those guys out pretty quick.
You got to own that one.
Yeah, it doesn't take long. What are the characteristics? What makes somebody a good designer? Or what aids design thinking?
I think a real awareness and like one thing that's kind of come to my mind in the last couple of years is the idea of what is color?
Yeah.
Like, do we ever even stop to think where color come from? And I always kind of joke, like right here, in this room, which is fantastic, you can see what I think two of God's favorite colors are.
Probably.
Sky and the trees.
Yeah.
Because the most ubiquitous colors in our life, and they really populate most everything, And so even in what we show in our store, we sell way more blue and green
Oh, sure.
than anything else. And what we've also gotten into the process of doing is we do deliveries of shirts. Shirts are our biggest unit volume in our business. Woven shirts, like the shirt you're wearing, not a polo shirt.
Right.
Other places like Ralph Lauren, it's polo shirts, and then woven shirts would be second. But we think about the color schemes based off of the month they're going to come in. So if you're thinking early spring, you're starting to see a little bit of some mid purples and forsythia and crocus. So it's kind of time for those colors to be on the shelf.
I love that. Not exactly for what you said, because I couldn't pick a forsythia out of a
yellow
color wheel. Okay, great.
That bush with the pop of yellow, kind of like crocuses.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, here's what I'm driving at, though, is I have a very different relationship to color and aesthetics than you do. Everyone does. And you and I do. It tends to be more different than we think.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm a guy I'm not colorblind.
Right.
We've proven that. But for whatever reason, if you show me a color wheel, those combinations are not intuitive to me.
Yeah.
I had to memorize it.
Yeah.
It fundamentally doesn't make sense. That part of my brain's just not wired up.
Sure.
So the way I respond to some of those choices are very different. What jumps out at me about what you say and some of the choices you make is not the forsythia, it's the commitment. Yeah. It's the choice making itself.
Right.
What comes alive for me in design, whether it's in a personal fashion context or anything else, and you want to create a business or a career, it's the thrill of choice making. Right. It's the risk of a mistake. Yeah. And it's the willingness to see and be seen as yourself.
Right.
And from that, you can give me any color in the rainbow.
Yeah.
Right. What I'm looking for is that authenticity in you.
Well, I got a letter last night from a guy. I texted 10 o'clock, a guy saying, he said, my friend's going to, this is an old friend, a college friend. And we don't speak that often, but when we do, we get right to it.
Sure.
He said, a friend of mine's going to a casual wedding in a laid-back environment. I didn't get that quite right, but that was what it was connoting.
Sure.
And the attire is dressy casual.
Oh, yeah.
What should he do?
I've gotten that one.
Okay. And my first thing was don't you wish people would be clearer in their definition of what you're supposed to wear? And then we walked through those ideas. What's the locale? Okay. What's the setting? Okay. And what's the attire? And how do you get at that attire? And I mean, it was by the end of this thing that should have just said, hey, just wear a knit tie and some jeans and you'll be cool. It was, 3 notes and probably 8 paragraphs.
Oh, yeah. My theory on dressy casual is that's an expression of what the hosts think they're going to get anyway, not what they want.
Right.
They're just retrofitting for what they think is going to show up.
Yeah.
And so they just make up a nonsense phrase. It's like, hey, you guys do whatever you're going to do anyway. So let's at the tail end here, let's define this word a little bit more. So we know there's a definition, whatever, on the internet or the dictionary. We don't care about that. You have your own lived experience with design and are a designer. So how would you express to someone else, a team member, somebody in your company, a partner, what that word means to you? What design is in your life or how I should receive it when you use that word?
Yeah. That's a fantastic question. And I've never thought of that. In a way, I kind of think of where does design come from? It comes from the creator. And so how do I honor not just creation, but the creator in how I interpret design? And that's a high calling right there. Yeah, I don't live up to that one, but I have to say that it makes you think, whatever I'm working on, it needs to be in pursuit of excellence. It needs to be in pursuit of something that really is, and that doesn't mean you can't just take something that somebody's already done and say, I'm going to put my twist on it,
yep,
or I'm going to put my color on it. I mean, I just went through a crazy project with redoing a car, and a guy bought it midway before it was finished, but I was basically taking the headliner out and wanted to take the carpet out and the plaid on the. I was going Pimp My Ride, basically, because I couldn't find a car that I liked. Okay, I loved Exhibit. Did you ever see that show?
Yeah.
He was a designer.
Yeah.
Exhibit was cool, man.
Yeah.
But anyway, like, and how many cars do you see go down the street now that have special rims, that have a special paint job? People like the idea of designing their own thing. So how do you express yourself in a way that's not going to hurt anybody, but really kind of celebrates what's in your heart?
Yeah.
And that's design right there. And it can be with food. It can be with cars. It can be with your socks. It can be with the way you order your books on your shelf. It can be the way you organize your drawer.
And part of it for me is having a sense that you're worth it. You're worth the effort to have that consideration. And whoever you're going to be with is worthy of the effort to present yourself a certain way. Right? There's a standard there. And it's not a one-way or self-imposed. It's in the way you talk about the shop. It's, honoring what matters to you and creating an environment that lets the guests know this was designed for you because you're worth it. Right. You're welcome here.
Yeah.
And we didn't just throw it together.
100,000%.
Yeah.
You are worth it. Because when you come in, I want to honor you.
And the more people experience themselves as worth it, the more they start to look like themselves.
Yeah.
They can more easily find what they want to wear. They start to come out.
Right.
Which is a big part of the whole process. Well, I can't think of anybody I would have rather had this conversation with. I really appreciate the time.
Listen, you make this very easy.
It's such a pleasure to be with you. Thank you, Sid.
Thank you.